Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I'm going to show you how to propagate lavender by cuttings, as opposed to doing it from seed, which I've featured before on this channel. Now, doing it by seed is fantastic, but it can be a little bit slow and you can get some inconsistent results from seed, whereas doing it by cuttings usually is much faster and way more consistent. Now, the downside of doing it by cuttings is that you need a little more stuff. Like, first of all, you need a plant to take the cuttings from, so you have to have a mature lavender plant in the right stage for cuttings. You also need pruners, you need to have rooting hormone on hand, and it's best if you have a place where you can maintain consistent humidity while you're trying to root those cuttings. So a humidity dome or a timed mist system is necessary later on. I'll go into that a little bit later, but first I want to show you when you know it's the right time to take cuttings from these plants. So we'll look at some other plants here. 3 different cultivars of lavender here, and 3 different responses to the spring. So the far left and the middle one are intermediate varieties. The one on the right is Lavender Munstead, or an English lavender, and you see it's taken a very dramatic response to the spring, and it's even begun to start flowering. The one on the far left is doing the opposite. It's really sticking with that compact grayish growth that is like overwinter tight dormant growth. The one in the middle is somewhere in between. Now, can you guess which one I would choose for cuttings? It's the one in the middle. And the reason I wouldn't take it from the one that's looking quite dormant, well, first of all, there's not a lot of new fresh material on there. A lot of that is old, thick overwinter growth. And I wouldn't choose it from the one that has flowers because flower stems don't make great cuttings. You can see on this one here just how much distance there is between those internodes. It'd be hard to get a really good compact cutting off of a flower stem. So I go to the one in the center, and one more thing I'll say about flowering plants, and this one obviously is starting to prepare itself for flowering too, but once it tips into that flowering mode, most plants are sending up different hormones, and it's hard for it to tip back into vegetative mode. So if you can get it while it's still having that first flush after winter of vegetative growth, that might be about your best time to pick a lavender for cuttings. Okay, let's get right to taking cuttings here. This is the tool I'll be using. It's just a small flower trimmer that I have on hand. I usually use my Felco pruners for most of my propagations, but this is quite a bit smaller, and so it's kind of handy for those small stems of the lavender. It also takes a nice clean cut. And here I have my rooting hormone powder. Got that at 0.3% IBA. You could use the milder 0.1% IBA as well. I just wouldn't go on to the higher concentrations. Okay, I'm going to reach in here and get a cutting off of this lavender stem and show you how I select what's the right length to put into the plug tray. So I'm going to cut it way down low here and give you an idea. So I cut it way down low, and I hope this focuses on it. I'm going to maybe zoom in a little bit too. You see that bottom portion is quite woody. It's actually last year's growth for sure. That's that wood with the dark color on it there. So I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use the softer stems just above it here. And now from there, I'm going to trim off the stem after 3 nodes and then strip off the lower leaves so that this is my cutting. Now I dip it in the rooting hormone and then stick it up here. Now on some of my other cuttings I trim these top leaves, but because the lavender has such a small profile and it isn't really going to interfere with the neighbors in the other cells because it's just not so many leaves on there, then I'm going to leave those on in full. And I'm going to pull off another cutting here. Again, I trimmed off that really woody section at the base. I take off the top portion where it's starting to stretch towards flowering, and then strip off those bottom leaves. You can cut off the leaves too if you want. That's fine. And then dip and stick. And now I have 2. And while I stick a few more here, I'll mention that I'm potting into or sticking them into a peat and perlite mix, which is not necessarily sterile, but relatively so, meaning they're free of common soil-borne pathogens, which may cause my cuttings to fail, and also free of weed seeds. So happy to use a peat and perlite mix. I'm going to fill up the rest of this tray, and then I'll show you where I'm placing it to keep the humidity up a little bit so that these don't start to wilt after cutting. Moving the propagation from outdoors to indoors now, and the reason I'm doing that is because outdoor temperatures overnight are still trending around 7 degrees Celsius, which is 45 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas inside here I can keep it a pretty steady 21 degrees Celsius, which is a much more appropriate temperature for germination. That's the equivalent of 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm doing it also underneath a grow lamp that I featured in another video. This is just a 100-watt grow lamp and a humidity dome. Let me show you the inside of that. The humidity dome that I'm using is just a plastic storage bin with a clear bottom on it that I picked up at Walmart. And you can see that I've just drilled some holes in the top here. I've drilled just 3 to begin with, and it seems to be holding the humidity fine on the side of the container here. I'll show you that as I open it up here. But it's just to have a little bit of airflow to come out and not keep it completely still on the inside of that container while still holding enough humidity to keep the new cuttings from wilting. A closer look at this humidity dome, and I hope you can see how much condensation there is on the side of this. So it is keeping a decent amount of moisture. Let me pop off the lid here, and you can see that I've left the lid of the storage container inverted underneath the tray here, so that when I put on the plastic dome, that it's got good coverage and it seals all the way around. Now, as for how much moisture I've put in there, I've had it in there for just a day or so now, and I just misted it once around the plastic and around the tray, and I didn't mist it to the degree of trying to get this soil soaked, just enough to wet the foliage and to keep that humidity in. It isn't really, at this point, beneficial to have them sitting in really, really wet soil. That will just encourage rot. Now, my idea is now that if I leave it like this, and I'll just get you a close-up of the cuttings here, if I leave it like this with temperatures around 21 degrees Celsius or about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, with sufficient light and with good humidity around them, I should at least begin to see callousing, if not a little bit of rooting, within about 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks, and I've stopped misting it quite so much. I even leave this dome off after I come home from work because I've seen an improvement in the condition of the rooting. And let me close up a little bit here so that I can show you. I'm going to pull one out. See if I can get it to focus here. You can see that there are roots now coming right out the bottom of the plug. That's amazing. It's been, as I say, only about 2 weeks since I stuck these, and that's pretty consistent and uniform all the way through this tray. So these are nearing the final stage of ready. And what I'll do now is, because I've been hardening them off with a little bit less mist in the dome, but the temperature inside the house is still a little bit warmer than the greenhouse outside. So before I do a transplanting step, I'm going to harden these off in the greenhouse just for a couple of days and have no humidity dome on them to see how they take it. And if they don't suffer too much, then it's straight on to a transplant. Okay, so it's been a couple of days since I moved this tray of lavender plugs out from the house into the greenhouse here. I was looking for any signs of stress or yellowing or wilting and didn't see any at all. It seems that with the amount of roots that they have on already, they've had no trouble adjusting to this environment. So the next step here is I'm just going to tease one of these out from the tray one more time. And there's a plug with a good amount of roots on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and transplant it into a 9 centimeter or 1 quart pot. The soil that's in this pot is just my regular bark mix that I'm using for all my other potting, same as I use for my roses, same as I use for my other perennials, and the same as I used for my seedling varieties of lavender. And actually, since I brought that up, let me show you a comparison between these ones here, which I did from cuttings about 2 weeks ago, and the lavenders that I did by seed about 9 weeks ago. Of the two pots you're seeing here, the one on the left is the one that was from seed, and the one on the right is the one that I just transplanted by cuttings. And I'd have to rank these as a dead tie in a certain sort of a way. This one here definitely has more branching from seed. It's quite small and it's taken its time getting a bunch of new shoots across the base there, whereas this one here has a little while to catch up on branching, but it has more leaf mass. As for the seedling in the pot, I can see, I'll try to focus in on this here, that it actually has rooted to the bottom and sides of the pot, just barely yet. So it's a little head in that regard, but I suspect that these will end up in the same place in the next few weeks, and this one took much, much less time getting there. And of course, all of the cuttings from that one plant are genetically identical, whereas all the seedlings are a little bit variable from each other. So some are moving a little bit faster, slower, some branch better or worse. So overall, I'd have to say that for speed and quality, the cutting is the better method. That's it for the video on taking cuttings from lavender. I'm going to be following up this video over the next few weeks. As those begin to branch out and stretch, I'm going to be cutting them to ensure good branching, and I'm going to show you how to grow great lavender in containers, so a follow-up video is warranted. Thank you so much for watching today. If you have any questions about the process, drop those below the video.